Good evening, podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 5 of the MeG Players podcast. Tonight's episode is Attila the Hun, the early years, and we will have the usual analysis and history, references and figure manufacturers, and we will also have analysis of 4 lists, the Hun list, obviously, and then some of their enemies, the Gepids, the Eastern Foederate Romans, and the early Ostrogoths. So a lot of content within Attila the Hun, the early years. And that is followed by an interview with Simon Hall, the founder and creator of Mortem et Gloriam. So that's great to have him on. And I hope I ask him some questions that you would ask him if you were having a chat with him. So, as I always say, without further ado, let's crack on to Attila the Hun, the early years. Good evening, Nick. Good evening, Richard.
Evening.
Good evening.
So, another podcast. And I just thought tonight, because, things are now opening up a bit and we're getting some games. I thought before we dive into the meat and drink of the history and lists, I just thought we could just tell our listener in Canada on that note, we are the 47th most downloaded games podcast in Canada. No Canucks. We love you, Canada. So I think it's going to be all downhill from now. So I think we should just quit while we're ahead.
Yeah, that's it. That's made my broadcasting career. It's on the CV from now on.
Yes, it's going on my LinkedIn profile tomorrow morning. So, but what I thought we would do, because, our listeners, they don't know us particularly, they don't know what we do in our gaming life as well as doing this. So I thought we could just have a little update since the last time we chatted with them, what we've been doing to try and drag the MEG gaming scene back into life in the UK. So Richard, we've had some games, haven't we?
We have. We've had 3 cracking games, all decided on the final dice roll.
And I think it's 2-1 to you.
Yeah, I got lucky with the dice.
Hang on, the way MEG games finish, aren't all completed games finished on the
yes.
but these games...
it was literally, if he didn't roll the right dice, I would have done it. It was that close.
And in fact, tomorrow I am going to try my luck against Dr. Simon Elliott, President of the Society of Ancients.
Are you going to his new house?
I am indeed. So I'm looking forward.
Simon and his, history. All I can say is, have you been there before? This isn't funny if you've been there before. Have you been to his new house before? Okay, so when you get there, it's the house Simon would live in. That's it. If you imagine the house that Dr. Simon Elliott, the archaeological and his archaeological dog would live in, it's that house. I tell you, it's like something out of Harry Potter. It's brilliant.
Well, I'll look forward to seeing it.
And ask him to take him upstairs and let him show you his bits.
I'm worried where this is going.
Sorry, I paused at the wrong time then. Get him upstairs. Show him the bits of pottery he's got upstairs.
I've seen some of his finds already.
Yeah,
previously. So
the thing that gets me, he has. I'm quite excited, so I'm butting in a bit. See, he has a hand axe that has been verified by the museum. This isn't just I found this hand axe in my garden. This has been verified, and it's like 8,000 BC, Medway Valley, probably not even Homo sapien, using it. And you put your hand on it and you feel that it's just perfect, where it's rubbed and smooth, where the hand would have held it. Brilliant. That's priceless. Absolutely priceless. So you're going down to be aggressively attacked by Dr. Simon Elliott. I love him. He's got one type of war going. Charge!
Yeah, it should be a fun game. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. He's a great player. And then Nick, what have we been doing? What have you been doing?
Well, we since that last podcast, of course, we had a game where you you ran out that much vaunted Crusader army.
Let's not talk about that. Let's not. You mean the later Crusader list that I said was unbeatable?
You hinted that you thought it could be, and
what was the result against the later Crusader list?
Well, we didn't quite play to conclusion for various reasons, but I think the Ilkhanids I had were going to win.
Did I start slow playing so I didn't lose?
No. You genuinely came down with a headache. So, anyways, since that, obviously we had some games down Sid's place last weekend, which was great, down Bournemouth.
We were invited to go down to Sid, Lawrence Donahue, who's been on the podcast with Pike, and he had a little medieval bash. And what filth did you take to his medieval bash?
I took the Catalan company in Anatolia, the lovely, superior but unprotected Almodovar, who certainly in 2 games had a great deal of fun charging into longbowmen, which is lovely. It's not good for the longbowman.
No.
That was great fun. This weekend coming, I'm off to Battlefield Hobbies to have a game against Lee Sanders.
Lovely Lee from Birmingham.
Hammy's gaming place is once again open for business under the new regulations. And then after that, I suppose we're looking. It will all be at your post-COVID Cup. Sorry, are you there, Richard? Or
I'm indeed as well. Yeah.
I can't remember the people. And after that, of course, back to Hammy's place for Armageddon.
Yeah. So post-COVID Cup, first weekend of June, is 10 players. And then in July...
Outdoors, we should start.
Outdoors, yes, 10 players. And then July, Armageddon, and that's just full on. I think there'll be 34, 36 players there. I really do. I think 28 tickets have gone already. There'll be a few people just waiting. Make sure restrictions.
Yep, I think you're right. So that'll be that's going to be great, basically.
So I've got a prize for the post-COVID Cup. So Nick, I should always run all my orders of soldiers through you to make sure I order the right thing.
And then get it wrong.
Yeah, and then get it wrong. I've managed to end up with a 28mm Imperial Roman starter army.
Okay.
And it's a lovely supplier, and I'm going to say, can I have store credit and send it back? And if not, that's a prize for the post-COVID Cup. I couldn't believe it when the thing turned up. What have I done? So, yes, Wargaming, what have we been doing? So we went down, it was a bit embarrassing actually, because Nick and I got invited down to Sid's, and then I think we basically beat them up.
Yeah, apart from Sid.
Yeah, close games against Sid.
Yeah, although you nearly beat him, didn't you?
Yes. So my bizarre army got 42 points out of a possible 45. So not me, the army. I can tell you that. But with it being medieval, it was like a medieval melee. When they, in a part of a joust, they have a melee. That's what my army was. It was just a load of blokes in full armour wandering around with big swords, beating people up. It was fantastic, especially when there was lots of bowmen, because the power bow were just going ping, ping, ping off my armour. It was great. Okay, so enough of that. So, but I think the message we're trying to get across is, the 3 of us wander around the country going to tournaments. And, in our social life, part of that is once a month we go off to tournaments. And things are starting to come back, so it's great. And, all the details of the tournaments are on the Facebook page, the players page. And I think, Nick, should we put in the show notes, just copy and paste the tournaments coming up?
We can do, but they're also on the MEG forum. There's a tournament section there, so
they're everywhere.
Maybe we'll just put a link to that.
Yeah, good. And great. So that was a bit of a warm-up. But tonight we are going to be focusing on basically Attila, the early years. And the interesting thing about this is that I'm holding a book in the series Battles of the Great Commanders called Age of Attila. And the other interesting thing is that, the author is Richard Jeffrey Cook. Our very own Richard Jeffrey Cook is the author of this. So tonight we must be in safe hands, because Richard is going to lead the way. Nick is going to do some of the work, and podcast listeners, you'll be glad to hear I have done nothing. I've been a little bit busy this week. and I've done nothing for the podcast, so I'm just going to shut up. And these guys are going to take you through the Age of Attila, and I'll speak to you when we finish. So, lads, here we go.
Thank you very much, Ray. I'm now thoroughly blushing red with that praise for the book. So, we're talking about Attila the Hun, who was born roughly 390 AD. We don't know exactly when he was born, possibly a little bit later. The first sort of notable event, I suppose, comes around 405 to 410 AD, when the Huns, who've by this stage already conquered some of the Goths, actually migrate to the Hungarian plain. Now, this event isn't actually documented in the written history, but it's significant because from this point on, the Huns become a thorn in the side of the Eastern Roman Empire. And it also triggers the migrations of the Vandals and the Alans and the Suevi, who break through the Rhine barrier into Gaul and subsequently migrate down to Spain and then across to Africa, and in the process do lasting damage to the Western Roman Empire and particularly its finances. The Huns, however, established themselves in roughly modern Hungary, and the sort of first major event is in 422, when a Hunnic army actually raids Thrace. And the Romans, they basically buy off the Huns with a treaty which promises the Huns £350 of gold per year. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like quite a lot of. Apparently, the sort of wealthier aristocratic families in the Roman Empire at this time would have an income of about £1,000 of gold. So it's actually not a huge payment. I think it just shows how wealthy the wealthy were in the ancient empire. Then around 425 to 427 AD, the sources mention that the Huns are actually evicted from the Roman province of Pannonia. So that's sort of modern Serbia, northern Serbia, that side of the Danube. So obviously at some point the Huns must have crossed the Danube and established them if they're going to get evicted. But the next notable event occurs 3 years later, when a king called Oktar is actually killed while leading an attack by the Huns on the Burgundians. The Burgundians at this point live sort of just east of the Rhine near Strasbourg, that sort of. And the Huns, probably enticed by Flavius Aetius, the Western Roman general, actually attacks the Burgundians. But it goes wrong. Oktar gets killed, and the Burgundians survive fine. 4 years later, another king called Rua, he leads a Hunnic army into Thrace. During the campaign, at some point he dies. We're not quite sure when, and it doesn't seem to have been in battle. But the Romans basically again decide to buy off the Huns, and this time the payment doubles, so it's now 700. At the death of Rua, it appears that Attila and his brother Bleda become kings of the Hunnic Empire. We're not exactly sure how this kingship worked. There seems some suggestion that the Huns were used to a dual system of kingship, but we don't really know. But Bleda, he is the sort of leading king at this time, and Attila seems to be very much a junior partner. But it seems that Attila had more contacts with the Romans, so he seems to be involved more in the diplomacy that goes on. In 440 AD, the Huns attack the Burgundians again, and this time the Hunnic attack is pretty devastating. The Burgundians are very severely weakened and actually have to sort of seek Roman protection. And this is the period where they sort of move towards the Savoy area of modern France. In 441, we know that Attila leads an attack on Pannonia. And in 442, there are further Hunnic attacks on a place called Archer and another place called Nice. So these are sort of border areas on the Danube. And Rome actually agrees to a treaty this time, agreeing to pay 2,100. So the sums are going higher and higher. In either 444 or 445, Bleda dies and Attila becomes the sole emperor of the Huns. In 447, there's a big earthquake that damages the walls of Constantinople. And Attila hears about this and decides this would be a good time to attack. So there becomes a race between the Huns attempting to invade the Eastern Roman Empire and the Romans, who are desperately trying to rebuild the walls of Constantinople. Anyway, the Romans succeed in rebuilding the walls before the Huns arrive, and so Attila decides to withdraw. Now, at some point during the withdrawal, it appears the Roman general decides this is a good time to attack them. Whether this was at the orders of the emperor or not, we don't really know. There's some suspicion that it might have been an unauthorized. Anyway, it's a fairly a brutal battle, but the Huns get a mauling, but they do successfully manage to retreat across the Danube. And in fact, in 448 and 449, they basically negotiate a treaty with the Romans, which seems to be very much on Hunnic terms. So Attila can sort of basically say, right, we don't want any Roman farming within 5 days of the Danube. Those sort of terms. And there's also a very bizarre and
tax farming or farming.
Farming. So basically depopulate these areas across the border.
Yeah.
There's also a rather bizarre and failed plot to assassinate Attila. And this actually enables Attila to really embarrass the Eastern Roman Empire. So the Huns by this stage are really top dogs. Things change at this point because Attila suddenly sees the opportunity to exploit weaknesses in the Western Roman Empire. And then that leads on to the campaign and the Battle of the Catalonian Fields. But that's really outside of the scope of the podcast.
Nice.
So that's your history summary. And you can read more details about this in the book.
Can I just pick up on very briefly on one point you mentioned, which is about the dual kingship? It does appear to have been a bit of a feature of steppe societies, or the steppe empires. It carried on through the Turks later. Seems to have. So I think it's one of the reasons that people try and relate the Huns to the Xiongnu, who were north of the Chinese from about 200 BCE onwards. But it does appear to be a thing. And what I recall from bits I've read about the Huns is that when Attila and his brother Bleda became kings, it would be likely that Bleda would be sort of the king of the East and Attila the king of the West. And the Eastern king would, in theory, be the senior. So Attila would have started off as the junior king.
Yeah, I mean, dual kingship occurs in other times in history as well. Most famously, I guess, with the Spartans, who had a system of dual kingship. But the connection between the Huns and the Xiongnu is circumstantial, but quite strong. There are even a few Hunnic words, that seem to have their etymological origins. Their etymology originates with the Xiongnu. So we're talking about 500 years difference between the Xiongnu in the borders of China and the Huns on the borders of the Roman Empire. But it seems at least some core of the Hun tribe perhaps originated with the Xiongnu further in the east. But the Huns really were a bunch of basically anybody who would fight for. I think it's very doubtful that they were a single tribe or race. They were basically a bunch of whoever they came across who was willing and capable of fighting for. And in fact, you even get a few Romans who actually join the Huns and say this is great, because under the Roman Empire, citizens weren't allowed to bear arms. But within the Hunnic Empire, if basically your position in society was based on your martial prowess.
I suspect the tax rate was lower as well.
Quite probably. I mean, even slaves in the Hunnic Empire could rise to quite important positions. I mean, that was true in the Roman Empire as well, of course. Imperial slaves were often the controllers of the Roman Empire. But so the Huns were quite an interesting grouping. And of course, during the period we're discussing, they also incorporate many of the Germanic tribes. So both the Gepids and the Ostrogoths, some of the Ostrogoths. You have to be careful. Ostrogoth is an anachronistic term at this point, but some of the Gothic tribes were quite loyal to Attila and the Hunnic Empire. Quite a contrast to the Roman Empire, where you've really got three different groupings controlling the empire. First off, you've got the emperors and the civil service bureaucracy. Then you've got the army. And the third off is you've got the church as well, who are starting to play a greater influence, particularly in sort of local decisions. As the Western Roman Empire collapses, it was often the church which was the core around maintaining civilization. The Eastern Roman Empire has a big problem because it's trying to fight really wars on two fronts. Either the front with Persia, the Sassanid Persian Empire, or the front on the Danube with the Germanic tribes and the Huns. And it never really has the capability of fighting both fronts at the same time, which constantly gives the Eastern Roman Empire a problem. Whereas the West, as we've mentioned, was essentially in decline because of civil wars. They lose control of, or abandon control of, Britain in the sort of early 400s. You've got the Franks who take over much of northern Gaul basically at the Roman request to protect the border. You've got the Visigoths in Aquitania. You've got peasant revolts known as Burkaldai in both Gaul and Spain. And then you get the Vandals, Alans and Suevi in Spain, and then the Vandals crossing over to Africa. So it's not a great time for the Western.
And I think just occasionally the Eastern Empire tries to bolster up the Western Empire, which stretches its already sparse resources or overstretched resources even further.
Yeah, the relationship between the East and the West is always one of sort of half friendly and half nervous, really, in terms of both have to rely on each other for their defences, because if you don't defend the East, it provides a route into Italy, and if you don't defend the West, it's drawing the need to have troops come over from the East to support them, and that's the politica of the whole period.
So there you are, Ray.
Well,
are you now educated?
I love the background. I love the but let's get, because that's what I really love. What have you guys come? Who's doing what? So I think Nick, are you going to be the Romans?
I've got an Eastern Roman army to present.
I have a Hunnic army and an Ostrogoth army. And I think you've got a Gepid army.
No, I'm bowing out of that as well.
I'll present the Gepid army because I actually created it in the first place.
Thank you.
I think this is very much Richard's podcast, isn't it?
It really is.
However, in the interest of giving Richard a break, shall I kick off with the Romans?
Yes.
Please do.
Okay. So we are looking at the sort of earlier end of Attila's career. So the idea was to pick an army in say about the late 330s. So I've gone for a Foederate Roman army, which is taken from the
430s. Did you say?
Sorry.
Did you say the 430s?
I should have said the 430s if I didn't say the 430s. I meant to say the 430s.
That sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So from the Foederate Roman list in the Italy book. Now, the list itself covers East and West, and there's differences between the two. I've gone for an Eastern one, because this is where as Richard just explained, this is where the fighting was. The Foederate Roman covers the East up to 440 CE, and after that, it's covered by the late Roman list in the Byzantium book. But I've chosen a list from the Foederate Roman list. So just to give you an idea of what's in this list, this is a declining Roman, a Roman in a not great period. The 5th century is really quite murky at the best of times for detail. So inevitably, this list you could say is a bit of guesswork. But it contains some recognisable things. It's got some equites, the Roman cavalry, remain a drilled loose, unskilled javelin, short spear. They can have melee expert, shard. They have and they can be dismountable. Some of them can be upgraded to superior. There's an option to replace these equites with bucellarii, which would be a senior Roman general in the East. In the West, it could be more like a warlord. These would often include Huns, at this time probably deserters from the Hunnic Empire. One of the things Attila kept asking for in his treaties with the Romans was that deserters were returned, probably to meet a really unpleasant end. But whilst they're in the Roman Empire, they would be recruited with alacrity. So these bucellarii can actually be experienced bow, short spear, drilled loose and superior. So they're sort of elite Huns. You do get some Foederate troops, Foederate cavalry, who are basically similar to the equites, but not as well drilled. The big difference between the East and the West in the Foederate Roman list is really in the infantry. The West basically gets fewer and they're not quite as good, or sorry, they can't have as many upgraded to the superior Palatina regiments, whereas the East can have a few more. At this stage, the infantry are graded as drilled flexible, average protected, experienced darts, short spear and shield cover. They're no longer aggressive enough to qualify for the impact weapon that the Imperial Roman list has, the one that precedes this list. The infantry are becoming more passive, more reliant on missile power to try and break up the opponents. So this is a bit of a transitional list because later on the cavalry change over to be armoured horse archers, possibly an imitation of the Huns or due to recruiting of Huns. And that's the army we go on to see Belisarius in the early Byzantine. And one thing the Eastern Army can have, they can have still have some equites clibanarii, the cataphracts, the armoured horse, fully armoured, long spear, devastating charges, shoved. There's assorted missile men, they can have a few bowmen, a few skirmishers, but that's the core of the army. So as I said, I've gone the list I'm presenting for your delight and delectation and no doubt criticism is an Eastern version. I've designed this pretty much in the idea of fighting the Huns. So that's the basis I've drawn up this list. How would I create a Foederate Roman in the East to fight against a Hunnic? No doubt it's interesting to see how Richard has developed his Hunnic army, maybe see how these armies would face off against. So I've started off by going for a very obvious command structure of 4 competent professional generals. At this stage, so I should mention the army doesn't need to have the fortified camp that the earlier Roman armies. So I've not gone for. So my army is quite cavalry heavy, based on the fact I want to be able to chase the Huns down. I've got a unit of equites who are drilled loose cavalry, average protected, unskilled javelin, short spear, melee expert, and shoot and charge. Shoot and charge there is obviously, if you can get close to declare a charge on the Hunnic cavalry who may be skirmishing, even though they're only unskilled javelin, there's a chance of being able to slow down the Huns as they run away, increase your chance of catching them, or at least force them to spend a card to prompt through fire. I've got 2 units of the Foederate cavalry, which as I said are basically the same as the Equites, but they're formed drill. Only one of those 2 units has got the melee expert shoot and charge. The other one, I couldn't find the points to have either of them. So that unit will probably be acting maybe more in a skirmish holding role. So they're all 6 bases strong, so reasonably tough. I've gone for a unit of Hun mercenaries. So more of the Huns that are deserting or fleeing from Attila. So they're cavalry, form flexible, average unprotected, experienced bow and melee expert. So, they're basically the same as your basic Hun cavalry. So that gives you a bit of shooting and skirmishing again. Then I've gone for, and again, there are 6, gone for 6 base units of the Equites Clibinari. Cavalry, drilled close, average, armoured horse, fully armoured, long spear, devastating charges, shove. I've very specifically gone for those because they're fully armoured, and armoured horse. They're basically very resistant against shooting. And against Huns, that seems like a good idea. And also they're pretty good in combat. Infantry is made up of 2 units of the Palatina infantry. This is the most you can have in this army. Both of them are 8s, drilled flexible, superior protected, experienced darts, short spear, shield. And then just an ordinary unit of the Legionary types who are the same but average. Obviously, against Huns, the shield cover, hopefully, will be really, really useful. And the fact of having 2 Palatina units is superior. One of the ideas there is that the Huns quite probably will have a reasonable amount of skilled shooters, and being superior, that slightly degrades the effect of the skilled shooters. So hopefully you won't be being shot at so effectively. And certainly combine that with the shield cover, and they are pretty resistant. Got a unit of 6 Auxilius bowmen, drilled loose, average protected, experienced bow. Unfortunately, I had to make them combat shy to fit in, but I did think, again, thinking about fighting Huns, having a unit of infantry bowmen who can outrange them and work with the other infantry and maybe the cavalry is going to be good for putting pressure on the Huns. And rounded off by a 6 base unit of skirmishing archers who are poor, unprotected, experienced bow, combat shy. Again, the poor it's not great, but they are only skirmishers, and it's just for hopefully adding a few extra bits of shooting for getting at the Huns. So, as I said, designed to fight the Huns. I think that probably came through in my description. Fighting other armies of the period, the Germanics, might not be so good because it's not being focused on defeating them. But you'd hope that with the quite mobile cavalry and some reasonable infantry, they'd be able to put pressure. And one thing this will be able to do that the Germanic type armies can't do is it's some shooting. So hopefully be able to degrade them. So there we are. That's my offering to defend the Eastern Roman Empire against the rampaging Huns and to protect a senator from having to pay up his £350 of gold if he's the one chosen to buy off the Huns this year.
The emperor just trump up a charge against the head of one particular family and just have them thrown in jail and all their property. I think that's how they paid the debts.
I think it was known to be doing that every now and then.
So command and control, you've got 12 cards, all of them professional. So your army commander can gift 1 card to anyone in command range. And you've got 9. I mean, I rarely say this, but are you a little bit, is it, you said a couple of times about point. Are you a little bit overgeneral? Which I almost, but in this particular occasion, are you a little bit overgeneral?
I don't think so because you've got a few cavalry units there who may well be skirmishing, and you'll want to do the if they have to run away, especially you want to do the turnaround move, which can be a yellow. So also I think with this one I would almost certainly float the CNC in this setup to be able to move the cards where I need. And also, again, thinking the Huns, you might be wanting to push through fire yourself, because they will be putting out a lot more shooting than you will.
All good.
So, I think you'd probably want 12. Though I think it's a valid question. I think people quite often just go for, especially the 4 competence, get 12 without necessarily properly thinking, well, actually, 11's enough.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly, because that could have probably given you the dosh to buy the rest of the stuff you. So command and control. You are the horse, skirmishing especially. And then how would your commands break down? So you've got a floating AC and then 3 generals each with a command. How do you see your commands breaking down in your kind of standard plan?
I don't think I'd probably have the infantry together, or mostly together. And after that, it'd be a bit situational. Again, against Huns, I'd be hoping to be able to narrow the battlefield, have a secure flank to cut down their manoeuvrability, and then try and squeeze them, basically. Push the shield cover infantry into their faces. If you can get those close up to a unit of Hun cavalry who may be unprotected, your darts can be very useful. Even at the longer range of 3, where they go down a colour, they're still possibly whittling away. If you can get close to within 1 base width of even the skirmishing unit, you go up a colour. So that could be used to offset the shield cover. The shield cover base can't shoot, so you might not be having all your shooting ranks. But if you're going up a colour because you've got close to the opponent, then obviously the Huns will be trying to avoid that.
Didn't you once do something nasty to somebody with dart armed Romans?
I've used this army, or an extremely similar one, against Paul Cummings, who had a Hunnic army, and he rather foolishly pushed I think his first move was to push some Hun cavalry in skirmish formation quite a long way forward. So I just double moved some infantry to within 1 base width of them, and then the next move through darts, which left his unit looking a bit ragged.
Were you on yellows because of greens?
There'd be greens, it would only be greens, but
4 greens.
Yeah, it was a bit of an moment, yeah. And also if you push those 3 units of infantry forward with the Cataphracts, the Cavalry quite close, you've got a fair chunk which is, it's not shooting proof, but it's going to be harder for the Huns to shoot at. So they become sort of strong point around which the cavalry can operate. And if you can squeeze the Huns against terrain, eventually you'll hope to come to contact, and you're just that bit better in combat against. Unless Richard is going to show me with his Hun army that my anticipation.
I can't wait now to see the Hun army because
Richard could get his retaliation in first.
Byzantine Eastern Roman Empire plan. Well, what were the Huns going to do?
So, I go through the Hunnic list.
Well, do you want to criticise my army first, or do it in the context of your
comment on the Hunnic list, and then I'll tell you the Hun army, and then I'll critique your. So the Huns in the Balkans and Steppes classical list. So we start off with, we can have nobles and followers who are form loose, superior protected, experienced bow, short spear, melee expert with optional shoot and charge. So these are quite meaty cavalry, 0 to 18 of those. Supported by the bulk of the army is horse archers. They are form flexible, average, unprotected, experienced bow, melee expert with optional shoot and charge. However, between 428 and 454, this was the period when the Huns were raiding the Roman Empire, you have the option to regrade them to form flexible, average, protected, experienced bow, no melee expert, but they get shoot and charge. So these are the ones that have become a bit more civilized. So you can have the wild ones that are unprotected with melee expert, or the more civilized ones that are protected but no melee expert.
Sorry to butt in, but I've just recalled somebody asked me fairly recently. I couldn't. So the lack of melee expert on the protected ones is quite deliberate. It's not an omission. I think somebody was fishing for having both and asked me, "Has Richard made a mistake there?" I mean, I said, "I'm sure he hasn't."
Oh, he's made plenty of mistakes, but not this one. So this is intentional. If they were protected and melee expert, quite frankly, why would you bother shooting? So it's not to. It's to still make the fact that this is a shooting army that can fight rather than a fighting army that has a few shooters. Any of the horse archers, regraded or not, can be upgraded up to half of them as average unprotected skilled bow melee expert with shoot and charge. So yeah, you can mix and match your horse archers.
So just to be clear, because this is where I would make the mistake. Are you saying that the cavalry can be formed flexible, average protected, skilled bow?
No, that's the one option you don't have.
Okay.
You have either average protected experienced bow, or you can have half of your horse archers average unprotected skilled bow with melee expert.
Right.
So if you've got the skilled bow, you're going to be unprotected.
Right.
Along with that, you can have some herald or skirry subjects. They're just short spear, melee expert cavalry. You can have Allen lancers, who are average protected charging lancer, an optional melee expert. And you can have some skirmishing cavalry. In the list, we call them Allen horse archers. Quite frankly, they could be any, but they are average unprotected experienced bow, with the option of combat shy and the option to regrade them all or none with Cantabria. So that's the list until you get to the Attila 433 to 453, when you can add in your Frankish or Rugian subjects. They're tribal, flexible, average protected short spear, devastating charger infantry. You can have Burgundian subjects who are just average protected, devastating charger and close, or you can have Thuringians who are tribal, flexible, average, devastating charger. So you can have up to 4, 5 even powerful tugs of Germanic to go along with.
Those Frankish or Rugian subjects, infantry, tribal, flexible, average protected, short spear, dev chargers, useful and not too shoddy. Useful and flexible and not too shoddy. I quite like the sound of those. Whether any of them make it into your army is another matter. But
no, I suppose this is where we come on to the army. I should say the Huns can also have various allies, including Gepids from 433 to 4 and Ostrogoths from 430. So you can play about with allies. But for my Hunnic army, I went for a cavalry army. So I left the Germanic subjects behind. I have essentially, let's start with the command. I have Attila as talented instinctive, and I had 3 competent instinctive sub-generals. So I've actually got the 1 extra card compared to the Romans, but I'm instinctive compared to their profession. The Huns have to have either a mobile or fortified camp, and for this list I went for a poor fortified camp. So it can stand for a little while, but you're not going to last long if your fortified camp sustained Roman. The cavalry army itself is 9 tugs, 3 tugs of 4 nobles and followers. These are the superior protected. I downgraded the bow to unskilled bow, kept them short spearing with melee expert. So these tugs are really primarily designed to fight rather than shoot and run away. And they're designed to be the backup to the remaining 6 tugs of horse archers, which are all 6s, 3 of them average protected experienced bow, and 3 of them average unprotected skill bow, melee expert, shoot and charge. Why give the shoot and charge to the skilled ones? Well, then if anybody tries to play the hold them up game, that's very risky with the skilled bow, shoot and charge. You can get in there, slow them down, catch them and disperse them quite. Along with that, I've got 1 unit of skirmishing cavalry, Cantabrian, combat shy. So 10 units, 9 tugs, PBS of 7 and a scouting of 6, which is quite nice. So good chance of out scouting those pesky.
Yes, the one thing I didn't mention about my list was the same PBS, but scouting of 3. I just assumed I'd be outscouted by the Huns.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of fighting the Romans, I want to, by and large, I don't want to get dragged into fighting the infantry. I want to be overwhelming the Roman cavalry with a bit of luck. Ideally, probably defending, because that puts us onto plains or standard terrain. But yeah, that's often down to the luck of the dice on that.
Yeah, but with your planning, when you have your standard plan in mind, that's an interesting one, because it's weird. I'm almost certainly wrong, but my instinct was to say, if I'm the Hun, I want to go first.
There is an argument for getting first and moving forward. Slows down your opponent, gives you a bit more space on the table.
Yeah.
With this, I want to be playing around the edges. And if I'm getting pushed back towards the table, I'm probably in a bit of a problem anyway. With all the flexibles and the 4 generals, there's always an option of going for one of the sub-generals as a flank march.
Yeah.
Get your opponent thinking, where are they coming on, what are they going to be. So that's always an option.
Yeah, but it would be a competent general on a flank march.
It would, but it's only requiring 1 card.
Yeah, it's my preference is always, if I've got an army I think I'm going to flank march with, I would prefer to have the talent to do that.
Yeah, I'm not a great flank marcher, so that's probably why I'm where you're at.
I don't think it's an army that you're sort of going to say, well, there's a fair chance I'll do it, a third or a half of the time.
And also, I'd just be scared stiff. You've got an army with 9 tugs, and I'm going to flank march 6 of them, 3 of them. And the 3 of them are, you could send all the experienced bow, I suppose, is what you'd.
I wouldn't actually flank march probably more than 2 of the time.
Right. Okay. But yeah,
particularly with a commander flank marching, that would be a real.
So what you're saying is the army is not set up to. Let's be honest.
It's an unlikely option, but in the right circumstances, I might try.
Yeah, and as you say, with the flexible, you only need the 1 to bring them on, 1 red card. So
yeah, and sometimes if they don't come on, it's more of a pain to your opponent than when they do, because your opponent's thinking, do I ignore them? Do I just press the rest of the army and leave my flank exposed a bit, or do I keep some units back to protect that flank?
Yeah, quite. Yeah. And even if you did flank march, you've got 3 competent sub-generals and a talented C&C, so you've still got quite a lot of cards. You can have 10 on table anyway.
You have 10 on table and probably 7 units. So of 3 of which are the nobles and followers. So I'm not going to worry too much.
Yeah, it does bring me to the nobles and followers. It's definitely one of these personal things. They're fighting troops. I don't like them in 4s. But you've downgraded the bowmen to really focus them to be fighting troops. I'd have gone for 2 6s, and to get the 9 tugs, split some, add some 4 base horse archer units, change the balance in that respect. I will recognise that could just be a personal preference.
It's playing the game of, I'm relying on doing enough shooting damage that by the time I've got the 4s in combat, it's not a situation where I'm going to worry about it so much. This is an army which is luring my opponent onto me, and it requires timing to when you actually commit the nobles, and you can get it badly wrong as well if you.
But yeah, back to your command and control with those 13 cards. Yeah. You've certainly got a good chance of putting them in the right place. You'd be very unlucky to be going, damn, I got the wrong cards this time to move that unit a double move around there to be in a threatening position.
It happens, but that's the whole, taking the army as a whole. You've got 13 cards, you've got 9 tugs and a sug. You hope to be in a situation. You've probably got Attila maybe with three units, the other 3 generals with 2 units each. you'd be unlucky to be completely stuffed.
Yeah, but yeah, still,
And,
I think
when you do come to fighting, you're throwing in the general, because by that stage, it's all or nothing. So
you're either finishing the enemy off, or it's that last ditch desperate.
indeed,
yeah. My preference for sixes for those fighting units does come off the back of my experience, especially with my Seljuk Rum army, which has a mixture of skill shooting Turkmen, experienced Turkmen, and Mamluks. And I found if I have the Mamluks in fours, something always goes wrong, basically. Now, maybe that's the way I'm playing it, and you will be more controlled, but I get a lot better use out of them as sixes. I generally have 2 sixes rather than 3 fours.
Yeah, that's what makes so fun.
Well, exactly.
One way of doing it.
Yeah, and perhaps the other side of that is I'm more accepting of 4 base unprotected flexible units.
Yeah, I'm never keen on them, but as you say, that's preference. The problem if you have a 4,
when they're a sub, what are they shooting? I mean, they're shooting one base down, aren't they?
If you're skilled, you can still be shooting on whites.
Yeah.
If you're in sug formation.
If I wanted to shoot on whites, I'd get experienced bow.
Well, I mean, I find having the mix of them, if you got 4s of skill, those are the ones you're trying to be shooting sort of from more from the angles, and the experienced are sitting there going hello. But it's I think as you say, these are valid choices, and it can often come down to just what you prefer, what you get best use out of.
I mean, I think what RJC said, he said, he was going to pick on your cavalry, and those skilled bow 6s shooting at your Equites, your Ferrati cavalry, they can deal them a lot of damage.
They can do, and that's why I say, my Roman, I'd be almost looking to lead with the infantry and the Cavalry as the sort of bastion.
Yeah, I have to avoid those somehow, slow them down, and focus on the rest of your army. Yeah. If the infantry and the Cavalry pin me down, then I'm in trouble.
And again, that comes back to why you want to defend, of course, against the Romans. Pull them into the plains. The Roman, my Roman army, I would be looking to defend in something like mountains.
Yeah, the mountains are your friend.
Yeah, which I think Ray mentioned the game I had against Paul Cummings. I think we ended up with the nice steep hills on one flank and a really, really useful bit of some sort of bad going on the other flank, which sort of in the middle of the table took those 20 almost 20 base widths off the table. So the Romans go forward warm.
I think it would make a cracking game, actually, putting those two armies against each other.
Yeah. Yes, actually, I think it'd be a really interesting game. Perhaps we ought to do it someday. Actually, another thing, actually, I should have mentioned with my list. I forgot to. This might come as a surprise to you. I basically got that list from Robin Spence.
It doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. He is quite a good army constructor, in my opinion.
I thought this was a really good one. I can't remember. I went down to his place sometime last year when it was possible to go and visit people. We had a game, and I came away thinking, I rather like that army. I'm going to nick it. So, a shout out to Robin for that one.
So, shall we take a look at the Gapids and Ostrogoths?
While you're setting that up, you remember if you're nice to Robin, he's like one of those gremlins. If you're nice to him, then he goes mad and starts eating. You got to treat him mean.
Okay, I'm not sure what to make of that comment, Ray.
Yeah, I'm actually borderline hallucinating.
So let's press on then, shall we, with the Gepids and Ostrogoths? These are both sort of Eastern Germanic tribes that adopted cavalry as well as retaining infantry elements. It's worth saying that the sources for both are, let's be polite here, thin. It's the lists here probably have a fair element of guesswork in the classification. In fact, I'll mention at this stage that if you're a Society of Ancient member, please remember the virtual conference is this weekend, and you can actually hear the author of our Goths book, who is, and I'm desperate looking today, I've lost email with
Michael Freehold.
That's it. He is actually one of the speakers and is actually talking about early Goths. So this is before the Battle of Adrianople, 370, I think it is, AD, but very well worth speaking. If you're not a Society of Ancients member, of course, my response is why not?
Well, I tell you, before we move off that, a lot of people in the MEG community, I've noticed, been saying they're joining Society of Ancients. The word is getting out there.
Great. Well,
Robin, for example, you just mentioned, he said he.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested in the history at all and in the wargaming, no better place. So the army lists for Gepid, we have 24 to 36 cavalry, form loose, average protected, short spear, optional melee, and then 0 to 18 best cavalry, which are superior protected, devastating chargers, and half of those best cavalry can be upgraded with optional melee. So you have a sort of punchy cavalry, not a skirmishy type cavalry component here, and obviously not the strongest thrusting cavalry, but on the plus side, they're cheaper. Along with that, you can have up to 36 tribal flexible, average protected, short spear, devastating charger infantry. So if the Hunnic Germanic infantry were of interest to you, Ray, I'm sure the Gepid infantry would be of interest as well. Along with that, you can have up to 36 archers, average unprotected, experienced bow with optional combat shy, and you can have some skirmishers as well. In 454, and only in 454, you can take Rugi and Thuringian allies. But if you take the allies, you have to take both of them together. So that turns the army very much into a strong infantry. Just by comparison, the Greothingi or early Ostrogoth list, and really these terms you have to be a bit careful with because they are anachronistic for Ostrogoth, and Greothingi essentially was just one of a host of Eastern Gothic tribes. There, the cavalry is similar. You've got average protected short spear, optional melee expert, and you've got the best cavalry that can be upgraded. So essentially, you have a very similar cavalry component. The only difference for the Ostrogoths is from 440, then you can have any of the best cavalry regraded as superior protected charging lance. Along with that, you can have a type of Alan or Hun mercenaries, form flexible, average, experienced bow, melee expert and charge. And your infantry with the Ostrogoths, they are tribal close, average protected, unskilled javelin, short spear with optional shoot and charge. And you can only have up to 18 of those, but you can have 12 to 60 archers who are the tribal loose, average, unprotected, experienced bow and with the skirmish. So a different implement there, but you can also add herald allies. They're available from 253, and I think available right through the period. So those are the actual lists. I drew up two armies just to take a look at what they would offer, and the best lists I could come up with, if I can find the relevant screen, are the early Ostrogoth has two talented commanders, a competent and a mediocre. That's just how the points fell out. I gave them a poor fortified camp. I had the 2 units of 8 warriors. Those are the loose, average protected, unskilled javelin spear. And I realised I might have included an error in the list there.
Your turn.
I had two units of 6 archers, so I minimised the tribal foot archers. Had 3 units of 6 best cavalry, superior protected charging lancer. So there I did go for the 6s because I'm probably going to charge them in, possibly break them off and charge them in again. And then 4 tugs of 6 cavalry, average protected short spear melex. Along with that, I actually put in 3 tugs of skirmishers. So I had 11 tugs of skirmishers. So 11 tugs and 3 PBS of 6 and a scouting of 4.
You can only have 12 warriors.
Sorry?
I think you can, in the PDF, you can
have up to 18 warriors, and I've had 2.
Is this within your early Ostrogoth?
Yeah. Are you looking at the Magna version?
Oh. Who?
Use the bookmarks.
Yeah. I think Richard's potential error is he's classified the warriors as formed loose when they should be tribal flexible.
I obviously didn't change the default on the army builder.
So in fact, I think that means that you've overcharged yourself.
I have indeed. I actually have probably 160 extra points or something like that.
You might be able to boost that mediocre general.
That would be an option. I might even be able to have 9s of warriors if I wanted. But
yeah.
You'd be playing at the edges, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I have to say, Richard, this army surprises me.
The early Ostrogoth.
Yeah, in that it's a lot better than I thought it would be. I had not realised about the charging lancer option for the best cavalry,
right?
Or indeed that you can basically have that many units of 6 cavalry in the.
I mean, the Goths fought the Huns. And it wasn't a one-sided contest by any means.
No, and also I think by having those 3 skirmisher units and a couple of the archer units. Okay, the archer units are very weak in some respects, but it's almost a case of a couple of shots from those doing a bit of damage is a bonus. Yeah, actually, again, from the way I've approached the armies for this podcast, I'm thinking, how would I fight the Huns? I think it has a lot of potential in that the cavalry units are quite big, so they can absorb some shooting. And if they make contact, apart from the Hunnic noble, they'll butcher the Huns.
Well, and you've got 7 tugs of 6 there. So.
Yeah, that, in a way, the 7, 6, and 3 of them are superior and charging lancer, which is is quite frightening. In fact, I have to say, I wouldn't like to face it with my Roman, because obviously my Roman's been tilted towards the cavalry, and the cavalry in this one probably outclasses it, or at least outnumbers it enough that it'll cause problems that way. Yeah, it's one of these armies. I think glance over the army list. It's not my sort of army really, but when somebody sits down and produces, we go, "Oh, hang on."
Yeah. So let's look at the Gepid, because that's a slightly different makeup. But it's similar in some ways. So the Gepids, they get 4 units of 8 warriors. This time I've actually got a talented and 3 competent instinctive generals at the points. So yeah, 4 units of 8 warriors. The cavalry, I've got 2 tugs of 6 cavalry and 3 tugs of 4 cavalry. 2 of the 4s have melex, but the final 4 of cavalry doesn't have expert. But in the best cavalry, I've got 2 4s of superior devastating charges and 2 4s of superior devastating charges melee expert. So I've managed to get 13 tugs in the army, 9 of which are cavalry tugs, admittedly only 2 of those being 6s. Now, whether that's a good idea for fighting the Huns, I'm not sure, because the smaller units are more vulnerable to the Hun shooting. But with the solid infantry block as well, and just the sheer number of cavalry, it's going to cause the Huns a few problems. Sorry, I was going to just finally say that I think of the 2, I probably prefer the Ostrogoth list, but they both pose interesting challenges.
Yeah, I was just about to say, of the 2, I think the Ostrogoth I would prefer. It's back to the 6s, the fighting troops, and I think if I was using your Hunnic list, I would prefer to be fighting an army that's got 4s.
Yeah.
Because,
however, against the Romans, I would go with the Gepids.
Well, actually, yes, it's their infantry, isn't it?
It's
Their
infantry of the solid infantry and all those cavalry units that can. If I can't get a cavalry unit into the flank of your cavalry at some point, I would be extremely disappointed.
And the infantry are they're generally better than the Romans in the charge phase and equal in the melee phase. Well, okay, I think not against the superiors, but you could do massive damage in the charge phase because you've got short spear and dev charger.
But what you're going to do with the infantry, those Gepid infantry, enough infantry, you'll keep the Romans on it.
Yes.
Nothing else. And if the Romans get in or you get in, it's not going to resolve itself quickly. So that you'll have plenty of time to work your cavalry around. That's what I don't like about the early Ostrogoths. Now, I'm going to put all my prejudice about having used Grathingi before it was nerfed and then nerfed again. I'll put all that on one side and talk about that early Ostrogoth. Right, those 2 units of 8 warriors, and forget the archers. Take 1 pot. Well, what are they going to do against foot? Nothing. So there's just not enough infantry in that army. So I actually vote against either opponents. I'd go for I'm actually quite impressed with the Gepid. I mean, I quite like superior charging lancers. That's 3 on the charge. But that's you're getting into knight territory there. But although I do look across and I see devastating charges in the Gepid list, I'm a bit worried about playing the charging lancers. Would you not pull them apart pull them out of shape and pull them out of position?
You would with a dev charger as well, wouldn't you? They're both
exactly. No, I said looking across, you've got the dev chargers. That's in a way, that's the weakness with this army. You could pull this army out if they were, even if they were short spear, javelin armed cavalry like they used to be. Wouldn't be able to pull them out of shape.
Yeah, that's where I think the Gepid is more vulnerable, because if you pull it out of shape, you can start ganging up on the 4s.
Yes.
Yep. And you can explode them very quickly, especially with skilled shooters.
So really what we want is the foot from the Gepid and the cavalry from the Ostrogoth.
Oh, now that would be extremely nasty. Yeah. It's certainly in period, definitely. But it's as the 4. Yes, it would be horrible actually.
I looked at the early Ostrogoth when you asked me to do some lists for this podcast, and I don't know, I was a bit oddy and busy. I looked at the early Ostrogoth, and I couldn't put a list. I said to Nick, I actually can't think of a list to put together with that list.
I actually think the other feature of the Ostrogoth list is the 3 tugs of 6 skirmishing archers. They would actually cause the Huns quite a lot of bother, potentially, because the Hun horse archers don't particularly like getting into shooting exchanges with skirmishers.
No.
It's sort of a no-win, isn't it? Because if they kill the skirmishers, you've picked up a few points, but nothing really towards an army break. And anything you lose is quite damaging. Yeah, I think people still don't use enough.
And shoot them on white dice. Yeah.
It's almost any of the shooting. And you can put them in front of those charging cavalry.
Yeah.
And just start daring the Huns to come up close. If they want to advance and push the skirmishers out of the way, they're going to end up very close to the charging lancers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might not be fun for the Huns.
No, all it takes is, the time you roll a 1 with your skirmish or run away, you get caught, and then the pursuit then crashes into the units that did make it away. Or forces them to flee again, and suddenly the table edge is coming into play. I am remarkably impressed, Richard, with both in many ways with both of those barbarian armies, the Germanics. But I think the Ostrogoth does get my tip out of the 2, and certainly this podcast revelation to me, that list.
But when you think superior charging lancer, 3 on the charge, that's not too shoddy, is it? So
no, it isn't.
Before we move off the list, tactically, are you saying you would push the skirmishers, like tugging a sug, but pushing a sug with the cavalry?
Quite possibly, yes. Yeah, against the Huns.
I probably would. I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't bother putting the skirmishing archers with the warriors.
No.
The skirmishing archers are going with the cavalry.
I mean, the 2 units of warriors in the Ostrogoth I see the use for is if you've managed to wangle a piece of rough terrain in somewhere that's a bit inconvenient, it could just add pressure to something like the Huns.
Yeah.
Just by going through them and go, well, look, there's 16 bases of us.
I often love a rough hill in those sort of circumstances because your opponent's probably going to stay away from you. So you can take the hill and then be a nuisance from there.
Yeah, and given the size of the armies, your Hun list couldn't then sort of go, oh, well, we'll come up and pelt you from the bottom of the hill, because all those Ostrogoth cavalry would be going, hello.
Absolutely.
Indeed, the Ostrogoth, fronted by those skirmishing infantry. I think it would pose the Huns a real problem.
Yeah, and even the archers, although they're downgraded and little more than pumping up the tug numbers on a rough hill, they can be pesky.
Yeah, and I suppose if you then looking at how would it fight the Romans, well, keep the archers out of the way.
Yeah, I mean they're probably sitting at the backside.
Yeah, they just become filler in that regard.
One in the corner. Okay, so before we move on to the next section of the figures and the reference sources, in time-honoured fashion, Nick sounds like he might have had some kind of road to Damascus. So in time-honoured fashion, which of the four lists how do you want to do this? Which list would we choose to fight the Huns?
If I'm fighting the Huns, I'm going with the Ostrogoth.
Yeah, I rather suspect I am as well. And I am sitting here thinking, I've got those 3 units I could use as the Lancers. I've got a couple. I was going to tick off in my mind what I could actually use it for. Yeah.
I apologise in advance to the person who, in a competition, is facing Mr. Gorkroger with an early Ostrogoth army.
I'll probably cock it up, something rotten, but I
can lend you all the figures if you want to do that, army, and you're welcome.
Against the Huns, I would still be very happy to use the Roman list. I borrowed from Robin, but I would be very tempted to take that Ostrogoth. And part of that will be because it's a bit different. I've used the Romans. I've used those Romans against Huns, so why not try something different?
My vote.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, for that one.
And
you, Ray?
Sorry, Ray.
Solidly for the Romans, my vote. I'm going to fight those Huns, even though it is Robin's list. Can't believe I'd use one of Robin's lists, but I'd go for the Romans. I think the Romans have got them to do the job. But the Huns, in the hands of an expert like you, think are a formidable those kind of armies as well. They're just very.
It's good. It would. I think you get, as Richard said earlier. I think you have a really good game.
I think that's a cracking group of armies actually, and I think there are lots of options for very interesting.
Yeah, and I think the way you brought out the differences between the Gepids and the Ostrogoths is good. I mean, I in my mind, I just classify them all. That's all Germanic horse armies. They're all basically the same. As I said, I hadn't clocked the charging lancer difference, which is enough of a difference in my mind to really make it stand out from the crowd.
There are quite a few interesting Germanic armies around that period, the sort of later Roman Empire period, combinations of allies or whatever. So take a look at them, see what you can come up with.
Yeah,
I think it did. Yeah, it's definitely a look beyond that first glance that I've only ever done. Perhaps I'm just too much of a Romanist.
Right. So, what should we do now? Figures for the armies.
We can move on to that if you wish. Got figure.
I don't think we're short of figure manufacturing.
No. I have done my usual trawl the net. In addition to the ones I've used, and as you know, now traditional apology to the 28mm players. I'm 15mm person myself, so most of my knowledge comes from there. But it's not difficult to find different scales. And of course, I should mention, of course, there's also 10mm for Will Denham, and Pendrach can do some very nice ranges for those. Anyway, in 15mm, there's loads of figures for Huns, the Romans, and the Goths and Germanic types out there. Doesn't take long to find any. The Lurkio range, which is also done by Plastic Soldier Company in the Ultracast material. The range is there for the Goths and Germans, the late Romans, and the Huns. You could do any of these armies from those. One of our perennial favourites, Legio Heroica from Italy, Giuseppe. It is Giuseppe, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Again, he's got a Goths and Hun range and a late Roman range. That covers it nicely. Khorasan from the States, same again. Hunnic range and the late Roman range, as well as the Germanics. And our inevitable plug for Essex Miniatures, who cover them all in their Ancients lines as well. Easy to get hold of.
I just mentioned something about Essex. I've always been a bit snobby, but it came to me needing to paint 100 men-at-arms to go down or whatever it was. And I put an order in, dispatched the next day, arrived the day after. Very little flash on the figures. Good, that MER range. Really nice figures, painted up well. I take it all back. Essex, you know what? Big range. They've got a lot of stuff. And if you just need stuff to arrive, it will arrive.
Yeah, they're very reliable. Yeah, it's a good solid range. Yeah, I think you're right. I think, especially for some of us who've been around for a long time, we might look down our noses occasionally at Essex, but they do some very nice figures. As you say, they're easy to paint up. A very good place for somebody starting out to go to, because you get reliable service. You've got figures that look the part, paint up nice, and what's not to like. Really.
They happen to be especially easy to paint up in this occasion because Robin Spence gave me a tip on how to paint the plate armour. And basically a man-at-arms is just plate armour. So null oil, straight on. Not even null oil. That was it. It was done. Job done.
Great. Anyway, on to other manufacturers. They've pulled out some at the more budget price range, but still perfectly serviceable figures. Outpost War Game Services have late Romans and some Germanics in their Dark Ages range. Lancashire Games, again, have late Romans, Goths and Huns, and they're definitely good price, and as do Fighting 15. They've got late Roman, Goth, and for Huns, they've got an Asiatic Nomads range, and they're basically Huns. So you're covered for that. 28mm, Essex have 28mm as well. We've got late Romans and Huns. I didn't spot any of the sort of Goths, but I must confess I didn't dig through their catalogue that much, so they may have suitable figures in various. Footsore Miniatures have a late Roman range, and also Huns and also Goths. So again, cover the lot. Gripping Beast, likewise, and they do some very nice figures, do Gripping Beast. Foundry do late Roman and Huns, and New Line Designs have late Romans and their enemies, which sounds like it's exactly what you need for the armies we've been talking about today. When it comes to the painting side of it, Little Big Man Studios do transfers for late Romans and Goths for various 15mm ranges and some of the 28mm ranges as well, so worth looking at. If you're not sure about whether they'll fit a certain range, I found dropping the guy a line, asking what size his transfers are. He'll come back and tell you, measure up against your figures, you'll find whether they work or not. And then there's the Vini Vidi Vici water slide transfers. Maybe not quite as fancy as the Little Big Men ones, but they do a job. They get you shields with designs on far quicker than you'll do it by painting by hand. And, like a lot of these things will look great en masse, and they're cheaper. So some options there.
Can I just ask you a quick question? The Pacto Starter Army, the late Imperial Romans.
Yes.
Are they too different from what we're...
No, is the simple answer.
Good.
And if you're looking beyond the actual starter pack and looking at, because I think they now do packs of the say just like the Roman legionaries separate, the unarmored ones would be probably especially suitable as the empire drifts towards its dissipation in the west, and also some of the eastern ones who maybe not quite as well equipped as other ones. But basically the PSC stroke Lurkio late Roman, especially the infantry, perfectly great, good for them. And Little Big Men Studio Khorasan sized shield transfers. That's what I use. So yeah, they
and obviously brings the price down a little bit to 2/3 of.
Yes, yeah, and in fact that it's the difference between the Lurkio metal infantry and the PSC plastic infantry in the late Romans is negligible. I've got both. I've mixed both. You really can't tell the difference until you pick them up. Yeah, they are very, very good. They are my
snobbishness about that as well.
Yeah, no, they certainly get my seal of it.
In fact,
would you like to have some book recommendations? Sorry, Ray?
I was saying, can you hear that? I have a box of PSC figures in my hand.
Listeners, you should see his face light up when he does that.
It won't light up so much when he has to cut out the shield transfers for, which is the one downside of the Little Big Men Studio transfers. You have to cut out an oval shape.
I have my craft knife set for that.
I find a slightly curved small nail scissors worked really well for going around the oval shield.
Oh, yeah, good call.
So, yeah.
Right, so what are we moving on to now?
I say, would you like a few books to recommend?
Yes, I've heard there's a really good book called Age of Attila, and it's part of the Battles of the Great Commanders series. It's by Richard Jeffrey Cook.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought we weren't going down the corporate sellout route, Ray.
It's not corporate sellout. He's on the podcast.
Yeah, okay. In this one case, we shall plug it. Yeah. No, Richard's book, very good. As he said, it covers through to the Battle of the Catalonian Plains as well. That is there on my list. In fact, it's the top one on my list.
Because campaigning ideas as well, and I think it's the campaign ideas, I think, are what makes it a bit different from some of the other books.
I did like the little one about the raid into the Eastern Empire after the walls of Constantinople collapsed, and can the Huns get to Constantinople before the Romans rebuild the walls enough? That I have to say was a very good idea. A very nice little play out a quick campaign.
Can we feel a campaign coming on, chaps?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I just like bouncing around all the different armies I've got at the moment.
True. I tell you, and for the intellectually challenged like me, it's got lots of pictures.
Okay, in which case we shall move on to some other books with pictures, because Osprey inevitably have several books that are relevant to this period. Some directly, some the period we've been talking about is within them. They do one on Huns, Scourge of God. They do a campaign book on the campaign and the Battle of the Catalonian Fields, which could sit next to Richard's book. It's got some history, but again talks about the Huns a lot. There's a book on the late Roman infantry, late Roman cavalry, and the Germanic warriors, all by Simon McDowell, as is the Catalonian Fields book. And they're all pretty useful, good solid Ospreys, nice pictures, good information. Some other books that don't fall into the too academic category. There's various books on Attila even. I'll pick out one on Attila the Hun, Arch Enemy of Rome by Ian Hughes, and as a companion volume to go with that is Aetius, Attila's Nemesis. So that's looking at it from two of the main players of the time. And then Simon McDowell, who I've just mentioned in the Osprey books, has done 3 books, one on the Goths, one on the Franks, and one on the Vandals. Again, are very relevant to this period. Obviously, they will put links to these, and you can see the full name on the blog. So if you're trying to desperately scribble it down, you don't need to. Because I like to, I just want to point out a few of the more academic books for those who are interested in diving deeper into the period. One of the sort of long time the book to go to on the Huns is called The World of the Huns, Studies in Their History and Culture. Although it is starting to get a bit long in the tooth now, but it does underpin a lot of the work that happened on the Huns. A more recent book is called The Huns, and then in brackets, Peoples of the Ancient World. This more concentrates on links between where the Huns came from and their links with the Xiongnu that Richard and I mentioned earlier, and a lot about social structures. Not so much military, but again, if you want to get into sort of like the background and look at some of those thoughts about where the Huns came from, and it covers bits on the Huns across inner Asia as well, and touches on other groups of Huns like the Sabirs and the Hephthalites. So background to Goths, Peter Heather is one of the big names in the period. 2 books he's done on the Goths. One's called Goths and Romans. Another one is called The Goths, which are very, very similar books. They look at the origins of the Goths, but they all, as they coalesced into peoples and their relationships with Rome and, of course, the Huns. So again, it's a deeper look into the background of the Goths if you really want to do that. He's also done some more general works on the history of the period. So if you search for Peter Heather on Amazon, you'll pull up a thing. I can't go without mentioning what is one of my go-to books of this period by Guy Halsall. It's called Barbarian Migrations and the Roman West, 376 to 568. I'm really impressed by it, but it is quite an academic book. It goes into a lot of stuff about identity, but it does have a reasonable chunk on the narrative history of it again. But again, it's definitely one if you want to dig in a bit deeper and come away from read something that's going to make you think a bit. And another thing linked to what Richard was saying earlier in the history book, when he was talking about the failed attempt by the Eastern Empire to assassinate Attila, the historian in question is a guy called Priscus, and there is a translation of his work, or what remains of his work, in a book called The Fragmentary History of Priscus, Attila, the Huns and the Roman Empire, AD 430 to 476. So again, that's definitely one for the more dedicated who want to go back to the basis. But again, it's got some really interesting stuff on the Huns. You'll be able to pick up on those bits Richard was talking about. People being able to rise through society and Romans living with the Huns. And I think the Priscus even mentions he met a Roman who'd been basically captured to build a bathhouse for the Hun in what had become Attila's capital. So.
Indeed, Attila famously had a bath.
Yeah, so if you like those sort of bits from history, that's one I'd recommend. And it's one of the few sort of bits of history that's a reasonable chunk that's come down to us from the 5th century, which is very, very murky. Not a book, but I'd like to mention Luke Ueda Sarson's Notitia Dignitatum webpage, which basically has all those lovely shield patterns for the late Romans from the Notitia Dignitatum online, for use as a reference if you want to hand paint your own shields instead of doing what most of us do and buy the Little Big Men Studios transfers. But you could copy those, and therefore you have an army that looked different from everybody else's, because believe me, most people get the transfers. Yeah. So all those links and the book titles will be on the blog for your reference when that goes up, when we publish this podcast. So hopefully you find something of use there, depending on the level of your interest. But there's definitely a good chunk of them with pictures, Ray.
Good. Actually, joking apart, the one that you were talking about that sounded a bit intellectual, I rather like the sound of that.
The Guy Halsall one.
Yeah, joking apart.
Yeah, he's working on a second edition at the moment.
I'll wait for that to come out then.
Actually, I'm hoping I've plugged that book enough that he sends me one for free, but that's probably wishful thinking.
Are we drawing to a close on this section? I think we are, and I think we should mention that we want to run a new section of the podcast in future podcasts. Maybe not every podcast. It's basically we're going to call it A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and we're looking for these strange situations happen in a game where the rules are. Maybe you're finding it difficult to fully understand what should happen, and you're not sure you've got it right during the game. But obviously, during the game, just roll a dice, 1, 2, 3, it's this, 4, 5, 6, it's something else. Keep going with the game that you're playing, especially if it's a friendly, and then you can always ask people afterwards. And we want to offer ourselves. It's we will be here. If you want to send us situations, and really, it's just about taking a photo. And then, sending it to us, we'll contact you by direct message or whatever, and we'll talk it through and understand what the situation was. And we will explain we'll create diagrams to go on the blog to support what we say during the
discussion.
And we have a couple of situations already in mind. One of them, which is we certainly will be doing, I don't know, it'll be the first one, which this whole thing about flank, when is a flank charge, when is the flank protected? And, in the game I played today, something happened and myself and my opponent weren't quite sure, and we just got on with the game. So those are the kind of things we want to do. So that we'll leave instructions over the next few podcasts to how people can send us those. We'll deal with them. So, chaps, before we move on to the next section, which is an interview with the founder and creator of MeG, Simon Hall. What else have we got to say, guys? What's happening?
I'm looking forward to the Society conference and looking forward to getting in some gaming. So keep healthy and stay safe.
And remember, Richard, lists for the post-COVID Cup are due this Sunday, midday.
Yeah, I'm pretty much got them ready to go.
I'm down to a choice of 3 for each period at the moment, so I'm getting there. I'm whittling it down. Tested an army today. Rather liked it. Roger, final thoughts?
Well, I think I've got 2 armies nailed down for the post-COVID Cup, dithering on the 3rd. But yeah, I think it's all about the games now, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
I mean, my painting has practically ground to a halt.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact I am painting some figures for Peter Cross for the post-COVID Cup. So,
in fact, since gaming started and we could go to each other's gardens and play, and we started doing this podcast, I don't think I've painted anything. It's really annoying. I've got to get going again. No, that's not true. I painted an army for Sid's competition.
No,
apart from that,
you bought some figures and put some null oil on them.
They look great. They look fantastic. They look great. Okay, so as always, you two, I literally couldn't do it without you because I'd just be mumbling and bumbling along, saying not very much. And we're going to move on to an interview with Simon, and we will do another podcast in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a real blast.
See you again soon.
See you soon.
Forward to it.
Forward to this computer. Okay, so podcast listeners, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the creator of MeG, Simon Hall. And, I realised that for me, I've known Simon for a number of years and I've had the opportunity to chat with him about many, many things. But you out there, you may never have had this opportunity for a kind of fireside chat with the creator. And I wanted to first, I know you don't want to hear my voice, you want to hear Simon's voice, but I wanted to just give you a little sort of snapshot about Simon. And, you got to understand, this guy created his first wargaming rule set when he was 13. And this is not rolling marbles to knock the soldiers over. This is a proper sophisticated rule set with 2 of his good buddies from school. And then he went on and he was one of the originators in the FOG rule system. And that's all we're going to talk about, FOG. And then I remember going round to Simon's house. We actually live very close together, and we were both shared a club for some years. And in 2010, I was round at his house. And he said, Ray, come into my war games room. Because Simon, believe you me, he has a music room and a war games room wherever he lives. And he says, come into my war games room. And, I tried to get past the boxes of toy soldiers. And he said, I've developed this new thing and it's Napoleonics. And I absolutely know nothing about Napoleonics. But it was this system and the generals, and they were moving independently, and they had, it obviously all went over my head. But so in 2010, Simon was working on the framework that MeG is part of, the CCC system. And then 6 years later, self-published the first version of MeG. So I think that shows you really the effort that goes into developing a whole rule system. And also Simon having the balls to be very entrepreneurial about it and publish his rule system for our enjoyment. So Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Ray, and hello, podcast. Yeah, it's great to be here. I've been listening to this. I have to admit, I've never been a massive pike person. The first one about the success has educated me no end about them. So I'm putting pikes together now. Doesn't it happen that way?
Yeah, Sid's got a lot to answer.
He has. Yeah, there we go.
So we've got an opportunity. You're here. So actually, the first question because I've gone out to the community and I've asked them to give me some questions and look for the themes evolving. But the most important question is, are you fully recovered and are you healthy now?
I am. Yes, it wasn't a pleasant experience. The doctors told me I would get well during April. I didn't realise quite how well they understood that. It was because
I think they meant 2022.
Did they? Well, they did say you'll be back to normal by the end of April, which I thought, well, that's an ambitious target. I don't think I've ever been that, but thanks for that. So, no, they knew how long it would take to get the heavyweight drugs out of the system that they had to put me on.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm brain's 100%, body's 90%, but at my age, 90% for the body's probably all you get. So yeah, I'm back in action, and as of about a week ago, really, I've got properly stuck back into MeG and other things on the War Games front.
You look pretty healthy and tan, but it's summer in the southern hemisphere, isn't it?
Yeah, it's autumn now, but I think for a Brit, you can think of it as something. Yeah.
Yes. So now
there we go.
There is one question, a burning question from the community, and this came up time and time again. All right, and they hold you personally responsible. Okay, and they need an answer.
Okay.
What is happening with Southern Mapuche? You're on the spot now.
Is it that really came up? It's good to see.
This is the question that people are asking.
Big picture stuff, Ray. I can see the Southern Mapuche. Well, I believe some people have painted up a big Southern Mapuche, and it would be a dreadful shame not to see them on the table at some point. So they are back in terms of being able to use discretion of the organizer. They're in open competition, so whoever's got them can bring them to my Skill Rollers Jamboree, and I'm perfectly happy with it. In due course, there's a puzzle to solve as we get the Renaissance set out, when we get Reg out properly, because there's a crossover and that arms in both. But I don't want to sort that out until it's out. There's no point. I've said to the team, let's get the Renaissance rules out, get the Mapuche list right for Renaissance, and then we'll think about little crossover issues for that. But I'm a big fan of having them in both. It's just, this is MeG's way of best represent the Reg way.
There was a little comedy moment. Yeah. There was a little comedy moment on the. We have a WhatsApp group. Well, you're a part of it for the tournament players. And the guy who was very concerned about this was saying, and I said to him, "Well, now it's been nerfed. It's not that great an army." And he didn't realise how good it was about 3 years ago. And he's like, "What do you mean it's been nerfed?" And we're like, "Trust me, when it first came out."
I remember seeing it 3 years ago at a tournament and thinking, that's a bit of a beastie, actually.
Yeah, that is a different
I think that's over-egged a bit in the list, yes. But it's
so we've solved the Southern Mapuche question. So
the big issue is solved, that's it.
Yeah, so if this was Prime Minister's question time, that would be a year's worth of solving problem.
I'd evaded the answer several times by now already from Prime Minister's question.
So thinking more thematically and taking a bit more of a helicopter view than what's happening with Southern Mapuche is this. So there is both worry and excitement in the community about the new system. And, I can literally say to you, from the people I've spoken to and messaged and talked to, that they're in equal parts. So really, it's just to understand from you before we move on to the new systems and what's happening. So there are people in the MeG community who say things like, let's get MeG where it should be. I don't know what that means, by the way, but let's get MeG where it should be before we start moving on to new periods, right? So firstly, so my question there is, well, let's get some bloody facts on the table. So where is MeG? So you first published, in 2016, we had the binder version, the Spartans and all that, and I missed that. And then one day you arrived at my house and said, "This is what you're going to play now." And now, then we had the compendium edition, which I have to say, production value is fantastic. I mean, really, genuinely fantastic. And I know, there's some things about the order of things, but, basically, production value is fantastic. So where do you think we are with MeG right now? What would you estimate? Well, how many rule sets have been sold worldwide?
I reckon there's about 2,000. So obviously, some of those will not being played, some being played by several.
Yes, absolutely.
So player base somewhere over 2,000, I'd say. We have got it out in quite a few countries, but some countries are just getting going. I saw this week there's fantastic in German came out. There's some great materials coming out in the US. I mean, the lack of events has made it limited. The big impact seeing it, all games we're playing it. So I think we are less than halfway to where we're going to end.
Right. Okay.
Players. We can have an ambition, I think, of having 5,000 players to do the marketing right and for the coming years. That would be a delightful. So that's broadly speaking where I think we are. In terms of the actual game itself, it's finished. There's nothing more I want to change about it. The recent tweaks, if you like, were all claries. Some bugger out there will always find some wording I got slightly wrong and can be twisted in front of a judge to a particular direction by a good barrister. So I'm always going to have to do a little bit of that. But that's just claries. The game flows beautifully. I'm really pleased with how the armies feel. Nothing's changing for 5 years. We've got a good run at just made us a really big playing community. And the really lovely thing I'm finding about it is I'm getting a lot of messages and people are picking up the Pacto version of the game and they don't come from ancient wargaming.
Yes.
It's great. They're coming from sci-fi. They're coming from 40k or World War II or something where they've never done anything like this before, but the system has a kind of appeal to them, full dice, and it's fun. It grabs a different audience. So I think we're building up a really interest for players who've never played Ancient who are going, oh, this is actually rather good.
So I guess to nail down the people who are genuinely worried because they feel they've personally invested time, I think it's great news that there are no changes to the rules. I mean, I will ask you some questions later about particular things when we get down into the micro details, but, there are no changes. There are, there will be claries. Great. I mean, stakes, there's an interesting one. So so 5,000, we're on a journey. 5,000 is the destination, and there are plans to get the player base there. And I think, nothing lives in isolation, and we'll come on to talk about the PSC tie-up and the plastic soldiers and the tie-ups there. And I think that's a big part of that. But that's, it's your business, not mine. But you've done that. So I think there are plans to get there. And as you say, events will open up again and we will be spreading the word. I believe I've been roped in by RJC to do a demo game at a MEG demo game at one of the Society of Ancients events. So there you go. So we're out there pushing it forward. So now let's look at the other side of that thematically of those concerns, not concerns or opportunities. People are excited about the new, the new things coming out under the CCC system. So firstly, on a personal level, it takes me long enough. Someone said to me this morning, well, it's easy to master Reg if you mastered Meg. I said, I better concentrate on mastering Meg first, before But is it designed for us to be able to? Because I think I've played World War II once or twice against Mad Dog Madigan, and he thought it was payback for all the pain I'd given him in other systems, and I've never played World War II since. So will I find the World War II variant easy to pick up?
Yes, I think you will. I mean, the concept I had with this, and I can speak to it personally, is I actually like all the different periods. Okay, I love my ancient. That's probably been the dominant period from time, but I've always loved Napoleonic history. I've always loved World War II. But I can't keep lots of rule sets. I can't do. I can do two. That's about it. The third, I can't do it because I can't do any of them well after the middle. But what's nice about this as a system is switching between the World War II and the ancient, probably a third as difficult as it would be because you've got the common core. So you already know you're going to find something where there's going to be activation, be a color system with actions and movements. That bit's going to be in there, and the coloured dice you get to resolve things. So it's a lot easier to switch. So the answer is yes, you'll find it to pick up compared to pick another set. And you'll probably find you can keep three in your head reasonably well. It's as simple as that, really.
This is radio coded, by the way.
And that's sort of the ambition. The ambition is relatively between periods. Use all your stuff.
I don't know what the technical term is, but will they always be you go, I go, rather than you go for half an hour and I'll go to the loo? Or
always. I mean, that's a real fundamental to me. To come back to it, let me tell you the story of that, because I think the concept of it's quite interesting. When I started off writing rule sets, when we were playing for fun, so we didn't need a rule book to do things. We started off playing true simultaneous moves. We started everything's really going on simultaneously. So all this, pausing and watching the enemy never really happened in practice. And we tried all sorts of things, writing lips down for the right-hand side of the table, declaring them together, or just trusting each other and simultaneously saying, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I always thought, actually, that's what real warfare is more like. So if I look at you move everything and I sit there, and I move everything and you sit, that's quite a long way from that simultaneous. So the original origin of this interlaced turn, where you activate and you share it, was to get closer to the simultaneous movement idea with a practical way of doing it. So it's always going to stay in my rules because it's a founding principle, really, of the whole thing, is to use that to get closer. And then all that I'm doing is using the right mechanisms to make it feel right for a period. So for ancients, obviously, as you will find playing the games, is people think, oh, that means I move a unit, you move a unit. No, it's not like that. You're going to move a giant battle line of troops because that's how I've structured it for ancient. So the game feels like moving giant blocks early and then slowly breaking up into smaller blocks and eventually moving individual bases once you're in combat with the micro move. Well, that's to me, that's like reality. It starts off big stuff, it breaks up, it gets confusing, it gets micro. This is what a battle is like from all my reading of battle. So it'll always stay. So the shared turn is a founding, if you like, of all the games rules, because it gets as close as you can to simultaneous movement in a practical.
So very specifically, I think there's a lot. This is a MeG podcast, but we want to talk about other things, and people are excited about those other. So many MeG players are likely to want to make the change to some reg, because it is a continuation, isn't it? I mean, there's a community of MeG players who want to play reg as well, in addition to, right? So I'm kind of one of those people, but I'm, holding back. How difficult will it be for me to learn reg?
I think you'd be able to play okay in your second game. There's enough similarity.
I quite like to play MeG okay at the moment, but
but like MeG, there's a big difference being able to play it and being able to play it well. So the nice thing about MeG that everybody said is it doesn't take long to get over the mechanics and start having fun.
Yeah.
But it takes a hell of a long time to get used to your army and play it really well against all opponents. That's a whole different game. And that's, to me, what we want it to be like, because then it appeals to the person who wants to play lightheartedly, and it appeals to the person who says, I'm determined to play this army for a year and perfect it and become the world's best skirmishing horse archer player, mentally guy.
The Horsemeister. Well, I played 40k for so long. I'm taking an army to SIDS this weekend, and I call them the Grey Knights. It's the Grey Knights equivalent of in MeG. So final question on that theme is the publishing schedule. So not beta testing, not alpha testing, not gamma testing. What's the publishing schedule going forward now for the new variants, when we can actually get something in our hands which is almost stable? Because obviously the first version you would probably be similar to the first version of MeG. So what's the schedule?
The latest, I mean, you just can imagine they were all thrown a bit up in the air with me being plus COVID. But we
don't want excuses. We don't want excuses. We want facts.
No, that's it for the excuse. Just that quick sentence. But the Divisions of Steel, the target now is to. So
that's the World War II, yeah.
World War II main battle set to be out at Salute, so
which is November
1450.
November of this year.
That's it. So to be out and for sale, pre-orders already sent out and stock sitting there at the PSC store at Salute to buy off the shelf. So that'll be the World War II set, including the range of 10mm vehicles as well that are coming with. Really.
Okay, so that's Divisions of Steel. And am I saying it right? Reg or Reg or what?
I don't know. I think Reg is what people generally settled on.
Reg. So what about Reg? When are you seeing that?
So Reg, Alistair's using the LGT as his final test tournament. So that's September.
Yep.
And wants 3 months after that to finalise it, give it to Christmas.
Right.
For me to do a final run through and check and spot any further tweaks, which point it would then go into action. So probably
Easter. Yeah.
Easter for that.
Brilliant. Okay. That's that theme kind of dealt with. So
and probably just to add the last one, probably of the big sets, Gloire de Guerre, the Napoleonic Horse and Market 7 year war set, probably around.
Those are just words. Those are just words to me. The next two with some, we can see them coming down the line. So
I know some people's concerns will be as you launch the other rule sets that dilute what's going on in rule sets. And I think we have to look past that because there's a big enough community out there to have a lot of players for all this. There's not a small number of people. And actually, I think we'll gain ancient players into the World War because there's a massive World War. And once people see the World War players, we can get their MeG. So I don't think it'll affect the numbers. It might mean a few different people playing it when the MeG players have opted in a World War instead. But I think that we'll bring in gradually. But even now, it gives us a driving to make.
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, I think that's been asked and answered. You know, you've got your target, you've got a plan to get there. You've been realistic about that target in terms of player base. There are, massive communities out there still to be tapped into, and COVID, of course, stopped a lot of that.
Yeah.
So,
we've not seen it. The Plastic Soldier Company's main Facebook is nearly all work.
Well, actually, that's a good segue. It's as if we meant. So here's a segue into, and this will be considering, what a snob I am about figures. Listen to this noise. What do you think that is?
Is that you shaking a box of MeG figures from Plastic
It
Soldier?
is. I bought late Imperial Romans.
There you go.
Because I want to add them to some armies, because this new fantasy army that Nick has built about Romans wandering around Gaul in about 500, 600 CE. I want to build that army. So today I ordered another starter set of plastic figures. So I ordered the Imperial Romans because I'm not that massively into Romans, but they're good to have in the collection. So I'm going to be painting. So I now have, instead of having a metal mountain, which I got rid of, I had a fire sale, and I have a plastic mountain. So the mountains that exist. But there was a lot of enthusiasm from and this goes from both the beginners. So there was a great question from one of your big fans who's a beginner in this on this journey. And they said they're painting a Neo-Assyrian army now. And they want plastic, I believe. Actually, can it be plastic if it's Neo-Assyrian? I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, what armies would you recommend to people who are getting addicted but are still at the start of the journey for them? So there you go. There's a beginner's question, which I think is very important.
I think when you're starting out, the trick is to find something that's not too difficult to put together. But I would always caveat that with the armies are all so well balanced, as again, the point system nicely refined over time. My first advice to everybody is pick what army gets you excited from a history or an enthusiasm point of view first, because there's a good way of playing and it'll come out fine. So if you like Romans because you like Roman history, pick a Roman army and start with that. The easiest armies to play of the box sets, but the most limited to play, but the simplest to play, are going to be the big tribal army, because you've less need to make use of sophisticated moves. They rely on their bulk and their forward momentum. So you get your deployment right and you play it sensibly, you can't go very far wrong. So starting with a Gallic or a Gothic, not too difficult to play. They're great places to start. The Romans are great places to start because they're very solid armies. You can't do a lot wrong with them. And they're very agile, so you can get yourself out of trouble quite easily compared to other armies. So the downside of the Gauls of the Goths is you screw up your deployment and you screw up the basic master plan you've come up with. It's not easy to change and do anything about it.
Cool.
So I tend to suggest those. Stay away from the big shooty cavalry armies until you've got used to the game a bit, because they're the trickiest to play deliberately in the game.
And stay away from tugs of 4 Byzantine cavalry, because when it goes down very quick.
Yeah. It's 4s of cavalry. You need to get to a bit more maestro standard before you start having too many.
Yeah.
As a beginner, stick to your 6s, stick to 6s to 8s, mainly 8s, and it gives you something solid until it'll cover up some mistakes. Once you get very good at the game, if you do get very good at the game, then actually playing with lots of small tugs is quite fun, because you can actually, with a great deal of mobility, it's fragile. So you can't afford to be using that kind of army for big mistakes and have a hole punch, because the cab test can spread like wildfire and the whole army can fall apart quite rapidly.
Yes.
So stick away from that.
Cool. Okay, so almost part of the same question, because I think a great place to start for beginners is using the plastic figures. Every time one of your distributors has a sale, I get an email and I buy something. So I'm looking, and I think that's a great place for buy the plastic figures, and you got to, and I agree with you about the history. You got to love it because you're going to paint the things. You need to love what you're doing. But there is a lot of excitement in the community amongst real veterans about the licensing deals that you've done to create figures in the resin plastic, in this new material of old molds from fantastic figure manufacturers who, or just making them more accessible, things like Zyston and stuff like that. I mean, maybe Zyston fits in both those categories. I don't know. Yeah. But what's on the horizon? How is that going? And what's on the horizon? Is it because if it's a success, you'll do more.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a rule of business, isn't it? At the end of the day, PSC is a business. So has it been successful bringing those, that IP?
Overall, it has. It's, it's one of those where it's a new technology, so it's taking a while to master it in a way to get quality and efficiency. But we expected that because it is brand new. It's a brand new tech.
Right.
But yeah, it's working and they're getting better and better at it, getting better and better at getting maximum yields and low levels of flash.
Yep.
So the figures are starting to look really beautiful. So yeah, it is. And the next one, they've just brought out the 100 Years War French box set recently. The next one coming out, our Zyston, are looking really lovely. I've seen the first product of those.
I think I saw some photos and they look great.
And because super glue works so amazingly on the plastic, actually we're less fearful of doing some separate bits. So the shields can be separate and put metal. So they actually will come out really long lasting. So they're doing those. We'll see how those come out. Then there's the Persians after that being done all in the Zyston. And then they're going to do the Han Chinese. That's the next schedule. Probably one every couple of months.
Which manufacturer is the Byzantine mold? Are the Byzantine molds from?
Byzantines will be some of my Lurkia ones. They'll probably be the Lurkia, Nicolai, Hannah, these two Zyston ones. And then we'll probably go back to the Corvus Belli and do a few more of the things they've got, the Spanish. So there's still plenty to go at in terms of doing them, and they're getting used to what sort of figures work best with the resin sort of things. So there'll be a bit more to come. And on the Lurkia side, well, I've got a few interesting things going on there. I've got a Mongol army in Turkey sculpted, and I don't really care whether it makes any money or not, but I've got a samurai army being done. It feels like I have to get the one done in life. I can't reach 25 years time lying there thinking it's going to have to be.
I'll tell you, I love telling stories that make me look like an idiot, but I actually have a samurai army, and inspired by Will Denham, who did his in 10mm.
Yes. Lovely.
So no. That's not that would be easy. Ray has a 10mm samurai army. So I go online. I order this army, and I have it sent straight to Zach in Spain to do the painting for me because I combine doing my own painting and Zach painting. So Zach gets the figures, and he rings me up and he said, these figures are bigger than even Zyston figures. I'm like, what? He said, you've ordered 20mm. I mean, they weren't sold as 20mm. These figures are 20mm big. So basically, I'm going to have a civil war with Will, and my boys are going to be twice the size of his army. But, you live and learn. Look at
that. There we go.
So you've obviously done a deal with the Zyston, or the people who have now own the Zyston molds, the Corvus Belli, a company that again, I don't think they were producing figures. You've got those molds. I'm interested actually, and I think the people who are asking these types of questions are also interested on what reaction you get from manufacturers. I suppose it's different if people are if you went to one of the manufacturers who is manufacturing a lot at the moment. I mean, Curaçao in the US. If you went to John and said, John, your figures are beautiful, can we do them in plastic? What kind of reaction do you get?
I can't imagine him want to do that. He's got a good business going with the metal. Be fearful of the plastic, cannibalize the metal. So,
but that's an interesting question. Would they?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure they do that much actually. My Lurkia metals haven't seen much of a drop. People actually ended up buying figures to supplement the plastic. So I mean, lucky as a small business, I don't died off big. So I don't know, but I think that's the fear. So obviously we've done better going to a Corvus Belli, reducing, and nobody was great figure. So and the Zeiston guys, and I know there are a few more conversations going on with the manufacturers, see what picks up over time.
And is this something? I mean, the PSC guys have been in the figure production business for a long time. Is this something that they're running with more now than you having to do all that?
Yeah, they run that.
Brilliant. So there are conversations going on where we might.
There are conversations. Can't promise anything will come from them, but even if it doesn't, there's plenty more ranges already got. So we've probably got at least a year and a half backlog in the Zeist Corvus Belli. But if people are out there and he was listing out there and has a figure range that's interesting, I think listing thing to do to license it to allow us to drop me an email, drop me a message, and we'll connect you up and see what works. It is a lovely manufacturing technology, and the figures are coming. The materials weirdly good. I mean, it is weirdly.
I'm looking forward to my first thing. I was shaking the boxes, but I haven't opened the boxes yet. But I'm looking forward to my first painting experience.
Well, if you've bent any spears doing that, because somebody asked me, I may as well share it here. These have got great mould men. So I had some with bent spears from shipping and a few tanks with bent barrels. Put them in a bowl and pour boiling water and watch them.
Cool. Right, now I've got to dive down into the detail now, Simon. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
There were a few things. So I feel like doing Prime Minister's questions time, and Betty from Birmingham would like to ask you a question. So how about this? And really, let's think about how this fits in with your vision of the rules. But so here's one: why can't you use fleet of foot when you are falling back?
When you're falling back.
And listeners, he does not know any of the questions before the interview.
No, I don't know that. That is really delving into a detail, isn't it? Well, it just felt like it was a more sensible thing to be using for forward movements. You're lightly armoured and you're going to run.
It's because you're running, skipping over the rocks. But when you're falling back, it's a bit of a.
My vision of fleet of foot was from my memory of old samurai films where you watch the very lightly armoured Ashigaru jogging behind the cavalry.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe if I play it on rewind and have a look at it on rewind, it will look okay. And I think maybe they could do it going backwards, but it feels more like a forward thing to me. That's basically where that goes. So
the person who asked that question, they are going to be so happy that actually you were a little bit stumped by that. It's going to make their year. Okay. Now here's one that I'm not clever enough to think of the question, but when the person asked it, I was like, oh yeah, that is a bit weird. So when you shoot and charge, you have to be in shooting range to do shoot and charge. So if you're cavalry and you're 5 BW away, you're not going to be shooting and charging. Right. Yeah. However, when you are charging someone who is going to shoot you, you shoot as if at 1 BW. So I guess conceptually, why aren't the cavalry doing the shoot and charge, waiting and shooting right at the last minute? So I bet you've got a good answer for that.
Well, the 1BW is designed for.
No. Yes, we're saying, but it seems different to your charging. Why do you have to be in bow range when you're actually going to? You may well make contact with the enemy.
Yeah, that's the answer to that one is a very practical one. When in developing the rules, I'm always thinking about two things: thinking about how to make it feel historical and realistic, and how to design it as a game. It's the right type of challenge. So it's a game; it's not reality. So you've got these two things. So fundamentally, the reason for that for shoot and charge, make it you have to have.
It's because skirmishers would die the whole time, basically.
It's some of these extra talents that I've given to make them rules have to give a challenge, otherwise they're.
All right. So that to me, I'm going to let you off because the next question is much more important. I'm going to let you off, but that is the rules writers get out answer 101, isn't it?
What you just say it was Prime Minister's question.
Okay, so this is a question from me, and I've thought long and hard of this and thought about the technical. I've got to say, green to yellow. That jump, it sucks. It's pants. Why is yellow so rubbish compared to green? You go from white to green, you get a skull. Yeah. You go from green to yellow, you get an extra wound. You go from yellow to red, you get an extra skull. Yellow is pants. What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's not pants. But it's not as big a leap as red, as you say. I mean, it's deliberate because it took me a long time to get the structure of the 5 colours, get them right. So
I'm not trying to destroy your whole CCC system, by the way.
But it's deliberate. As I go through getting the levels of advantage, if you map all the advantage, I said to me, well, actually at the +3 level, because every time I look at those look like the big over, and at the +1, I want to drop. But I didn't want to yellow the 2 advantage. I want the curve to be that it kicks high, quite deliberate. So it is better, but you've only gained the extra wound capability.
Yeah.
But it's deliberately how I wanted the curve to go. Plus, the key to the game is to have having a bit better advantage, a bit better, having a big advantage. Okay, so that's the design of the win. So your biggest and most important thing is to hunt for 1-ups, because they are the real kicker. And 2-up is a bit better than a 1-up.
Yeah, I'm not even going to go with any double entendres. We don't do that on the podcast from what you've just said. But so, okay, so. Yeah, I was only joking with you anyway, but it does. I mean, I roll blanks anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what dice I'm rolling.
I think there is a bizarre mystical thing going on from some MeG got up there, and it happens to me too. I seem to do better with green dice than yellow ones. And I don't know quite why that feels that way.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that if I had one tip to any new player, why would I be giving people tips? But don't go in on green unless you have to, but green white or all day, every day. That's what you're looking for. Exactly. Okay, so I've kind of reached the end of my attention span because I'm a bit of a goldfish.
That's boring.
Yeah. So no. So no. Seriously, it's been real fun having you on. But give us the message to remember. This is a MeG podcast. People are excited about the other variants, bit like the. Well, no, we're not excited about the COVID variants, are we? But so really, I think the MeG. What's your message to the MeG community now, going forward?
Well, I think right now, forget the other variants for the time being. You'll see those when they come out, and I'm sure they'll be fun for those periods. Right now, what we need to do is keep spreading the purple mantra, keep spreading the good news, and just gather players. And get as many new players into the ancient wargaming hobby as possible through the accessibility of Pack 2 and the easy figures. It's our job as ambassadors to go out and gather more players into the hobby. I mean, my ambition for this was not to get everybody who plays all the other rule systems we know well out there over. I mean, that's happening to a fair degree. It was actually to expand the ancient wargaming hobby in the first place and draw a load of players in. So everybody, just if you like the game, keep telling everyone, keep publishing stuff that says so. And when we get to events, tell them in person and give them little demos and point them at the new website as of June, which will have a whole series of new videos. And let's just push that journey of getting loads and loads of players of MeG all around the world and getting some great events and gatherings. And as a specific, everybody out there who can make it, sign up to the LGT. It's going to be fantastic. Travel looks like it's going to be okay. So I should be there. We've got the Maximus event for the World Championship there. If you don't want to play something so serious because you're new, there's a Pack 2 gathering there. Bring a Pack 2 army along, and I'm going to run that and help people learn to play and advise. And frankly, if you've got an army and you haven't even played, sign up and come along. We'll teach you how to play on the day. It's no problem. It's an easy game to pick up on the day. So really, that's it. Just keep spreading the purple good news, and let's get more and more people interested in playing it. And just keep reminding them that it seems to give great historical film results, and it's great fun. And that seems to be the feedback I get all the time from everybody. And couldn't be happier because that basically ticks the 2 boxes in terms of objectives. And thank you everybody for the great feedback, especially through the tough time I've had the last 4 months. It's been heartwarming and a real help to get through a health struggle. There's not been to all of you support and the kindness.
Well, I can't really end on anything. I can't top that. That's fantastic, Simon. But I have one final question for you. Have you dry cleaned the purple suit?
Yes, it's been dry cleaned. It's actually sitting in Cheltenham at a friend's.
And will you be wearing it at the LGT?
I intend to be wearing it at the LGT. Absolutely.
Well, I will see you there, and it'll be great to see as many people at the LGT gathering for whatever system you want to play. It'll be fantastic. So thank you, Simon. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Keep up all the great work on the podcast. I love listening to them too. So I'll keep sharing them with everybody, and let's see if we can build a bigger and bigger audience for it. It's all good stuff. Great.
Brilliant. Thanks, buddy. See you soon.